Hello folks. So for this little video here, what we're going to do is we're going to take one of our form characters that we created and we're going to make a finalized version of them. We're not going to color them in just yet. We're just going to leave them black and white, and we will color them in later, which is actually a very simple process. So let's start here. First, I've sort of merged all of my sketches onto a single layer here, and I did that using Control E to merge everything down. What I'm going to do here is I'm just going to grab this rectangular marquee tool. I'm going to drag it over my robot, and I'm just going to use my robot here as an example for today. All right, so we're going to do Edit, Copy Merged, or Shift Control C. Copy Merged basically takes a screenshot of what you've got in here at the pixel density that you have. So you can say Control V or Edit Paste, and that gives me this nice little screenshot. So if I turn off my notes and refs, that gives me this little image. Okay, so I'm going to use this as my guide to work from. Off to the side here, what I've done is I've created a series of layers called head, body, leg, and arm. We'll add more layers to this as we progress. We're going to start with our head, and if I go and I grab my my brush here, I'd recommend if you have the sketch.tpl loaded into your tool presets, go to AAA Drawer. You may want to go into your brush settings, and you may want to reduce your spacing. Spacing on this brush is a little bit wide in my opinion, and you want this nice clean flow. I'd also recommend taking off the transfer in your brush settings. That'll give you a nice sharp tapered edge, which is definitely desirable when you're creating finished work. Now remember, this tool preset does also include coloration, so we're going to need to change our foreground color, and we'll just sort of change it to a dark gray. On our head, one thing that we're going to do is we're going to make sure that we have this sort of pill-shaped head. And the nice thing about our Photoshop brushes, our basic Photoshop brushes, is that they're round. And so if we're going to actually make this guy like a pretty good size, and then we're going to size him down. Remember, in digital space, you don't have to work at the same size as what you're going to present. You can work quite large, which gives you a little extra ability to create detail. So in this case, I'm just going to press my stylus down. I'm not going to move it, and then I'm going to hold down Shift, and I'm just going to drag my stylus over, and that'll make that nice pill shape. Okay, so I see that the body here is quite a bit smaller, so I'm going to go to my body layer, turn that on, and I am going to just, again, hold Shift down and pull my brush up. And what will that do? That will create this form. We'll get that bottom edge figured out later. Right, then on our leg, let's do a leg here. We'll do it off to the side. We don't need to necessarily do it right on our figure. So our leg's going to be a little bit more complicated than that, but should be pretty straightforward. So we're just going to do maybe kind of a curve like that, right? And then what we can do is we can take our lasso tool, or if you're a little bit more hesitant with your drawing, you might want to try the polygonal lasso tool. You know, one of the nice things about these tools, even if you were to use a polygonal one, right? If you make something nice and large, and you add more anchor points, what ends up happening is you end up with something that looks like it might be smooth if you were to go away from it. So we're going to do that guy. just like that. And we see these sorts of spiked edges down here. So I'm going to go into my tool presets for my erasers. I'm going to go to 111 erase and control plus, control minus. Remember, spacebar is how you're panning. I'm just going to take my eraser and I'm going to go in very, very gently along the edge here. And I'm going to get rid of those sharper angles. Another way that you can do it, if you're feeling it, is you can take your lasso tool and then hit delete. Delete. And there we go. They have kind of a leg and a foot. Now we need an arm. And our arms are shaped a little bit differently, aren't they? Right? They're not quite as uniform as our legs. So in this case, I'm just actually going to use the lasso tool. Now another tool that you can use if you're, again, if you need a little bit more of a confidence build is maybe this pen tool. Now the pen tool is a vector tool that's found within Photoshop, and to use it, you can't use it like you would think, which is like using a pen. What you're going to need to do, this is more like an Illustrator tools, right? So when I click, this is a click and drag tool, right? So click and then click drag, and you can see how I'm making a bit of an arc here. Now this tool isn't tremendously intuitive, unfortunately. So if this is the way that you want to create some of your forms, it might take a little bit of work getting used to this, right? Now, if I want to make some adjustments to that shape, one thing that's important is that every tool under the pen here, like the text and this little arrow tool, not to be confused with the move tool, and the shape tool here, all four of these are all vector tools, and they should be used in conjunction with one another, right? So if I want to make any changes to the spline that I've made here, one thing I can do, if I want to move the spline around, I can go to path selection and I can take it and move it around. Or if I want to move just the points on there, I can go to direct selection tool and then I can move the points around, and I can even grab these anchors and change how those anchors look. Right. Now if I hold Alt down, you'll notice that I can do stuff like that with my anchors. I can break my anchor, and that gives me a little bit more control. Right? So there we have it. And we can use that for our arm. Now the problem is that we don't have any paint in here, right? So what we need to do is we need to be able to select this. In order to do that, you actually have to have another panel open. You need the Paths panel. I'm going to change the name of this work path to Arm. If we ever need to use this path again, it will then be saved under Paths, right? And all I would need to do is just like I do when I select anything on layers, I will control click into that space and it will create a highlighted marquee. In this particular case, I can grab a brush, go onto my layer. Remember, you're not going to be able to brush in your paths, you're always brushing on your layers. And I can just do that, Control D to deselect, and I've got my arm ready. Okay. Now if you don't like that, another way that you can do things, we'll make a new layer here just to kind of show you. Another way to approach this would be to use your lasso tool, and you could just draw that shape if you felt confident, and you know, just erase the parts that you don't like. Right. So just imagine that you're kind of a woodworker, and you know, sometimes you have some unfinished edges and you just need to sort of sand those off, right? Sand those down. You know, in this particular case, I actually kind of like the one that I drew a little bit better than this path one, so I'm just going to delete that one, and we'll call this one our new arm. Now, this particular arm is black, which is the wrong value. So what I would like to do is I would like to correct that. And one of the ways that I can do that, there's a very easy way. And this uses what's called layer styles. So if I double click on the layer, what ends up happening is this box comes up. Now your box might look a little bit different. You know, some versions of Photoshop will allow you to add all of these options in one at a time. Some of them will come with the styles preloaded. But one of the neat things is, you know, you can basically take all of these different options here and change them. So if I want to do a color overlay, I can just pick the color that I want. I can use my color picker in my scene and say, okay. If I wanted to change the opacity on that, I can do that. There's other things in here too, right? There's things like stroke, which will give you an outline around what you're doing. There's inner shadow. You can see that sort of gives a shadow on the inside of that edge. There's inner glow. There's satin, which sort of gives things kind of a satiny look, obviously, as the name implies. Gradient overlay. You can add gradients to everything. Right? If you don't see it, it might be because your color is blocking it. Yeah, okay, so there's that. You can overlay patterns. You can bevel and emboss all of this stuff. We'll look at some of that stuff later. That's not particularly important right this second. But if you want to get your colors matched right away without doing another color dropper and making like jagged edges around the outside, which is sometimes what happens when you do that, an easy way to do it is to just do a color overlay, say OK, make a new layer, pull the layer below. Why? Because we're going to click on the layer above and shift hold to grab the two of them together, and do Control E, and that merges them. Now, if the layer is, the unnamed layer is above arm here, it will actually just take on the name of the unnamed layer. And sometimes your labeling can be very complicated, and you might not want to have to retype that all the time. So do be careful about how you address that specifically. Okay, so we've got our head, our body, our leg, our arm, and you'll notice that our body, our tin can body here, doesn't quite have the same base here. So actually we're going to make a quick little tool, and we're going to subtract the part of the body that we don't want. So I'm actually just going to, on a new layer, I'm going to make a new brush. I'm going to make it just a little bit wider than this, and then I'm going to twist this brush so that it has this sort of a look to it. And I'm just going to stamp it once in my scene, and I'm going to pull it right up to about here, and I'm going to Control click, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do select inverse, and what that will do is it selects everything but this. Now if I go down to my body and I use my my eraser, I can just erase away the part that I don't want. Control D to deselect, and there we go. I've got a nice sort of rounded bottom. And if you wanted to make that, you know, a little bit rounder, certainly all you would need to do is change that brush. I'm content with this for now. Let's just kind of do this. All right, I'm gonna flip this leg around here too. Let's see if we can do that. Transform. Actually, let's not worry about this yet. Let's start with just getting those parts in place. This can looks like it's a little long, so I'm going to sort of bring it up a little bit. till I feel like I've maybe got proportions about where I want them. And obviously you can deviate from this a little bit. Okay, that looks fine. All right, so this will be part one. In the second part, we're going to actually sort of clean these shapes up, turn them into forms, and then we will make some, additions, right, to all of this. And I'll show you how to kind of put these together in a way that will save you a little bit of time as you're working on this project. Just one last thing, make that a little bit smaller. All right, we'll stop there and we'll pick it up again, turning these into forms.